Hello, everybody. Today, we are back to talk about more Elden Ring lore. And today, we're going to be covering the topic of Godfrey, first Elden Lord, and one of the greatest warriors to ever walk the lands between. So, Godfrey, if you've played the game, you'll know him. As a little bit of background, I guess, just setting the stage in case some of you haven't played Elden Ring. Elden Ring is set in the lands between, and there is a god who lives on the land, Queen Marika the Eternal. And as she was establishing her order, her civilization, her empire, you could say, she needed a martial arm to do it. She needed a warrior to lead her armies. And she chose a warrior, a barbarian named Hoarah Loux from the Badlands. And he was renamed Godfrey. And he became Marika's first consort, her first husband, you could say. And he led a series of campaigns on her behalf. So today I'm going to go through all the evidence that I know of around Godfrey in the game. All of the items, the item descriptions, and we're going to learn the lore directly from the source. And I will kind of comment and tie things together and whatnot. But for the most part, the lore will, be speaking for itself. So, I'm going to begin by reading Godric's Great Rune, which says, "A great rune of the shard-bearer Godric. Its blessing raises all attributes. This great rune is known as the Anchor Ring, found in the center of the Elden Ring. The first demigods were the Elden Lord Godfrey and his offspring, the Golden Lineage." So, right off the bat, we have learned that Godfrey, the Elden Lord, was a demigod, and his children were demigods as well. We can now turn over to a talisman called Godfrey Icon, a legendary talisman depicting the Elden Lord Godfrey. Raises charge attack power of sorceries, incantations, and skills. Godfrey was a ferocious warrior. When he vowed to become a lord, he took the beast Regent Serosh upon his back to suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within. So that's pretty evocative and pretty interesting. Who is Serosh? Well, we can look to some other items to get some information about him. The Beast Claw Great Hammer. Great hammer with a striking end, modeled to resemble 5 beastly claws. The black nails protruding from golden fur are said to represent Serosh, Lord of Beasts, who went to become King Godfrey's regent. So Serosh was the Lord of Beasts. Let's look at the Golden Beast Crest shield. shield of dull gold with a beast engraved as its crest, lighter than most great shields, and subsequently easier to wield. The beast depicted is Serosh, aged counselor who guides the golden lineage. So this is interesting. Serosh is the aged counselor who guides the golden lineage. So I'm not sure how literal this is meant. Was Serosh literally a counselor that, members of the golden lineage would come speak to and ask for advice? Or is this kind of symbolic? And he was, symbolically the counselor of the golden lineage. And I make this a point because Godfrey was not around forever, and Serosh stayed with Godfrey when Godfrey left. So maybe Serosh was literally a counselor during the early days, and then when Godfrey took his leave, Serosh went with him and kind of remained symbolically a counselor for the lineage. I don't know. Next we have the Tree and Beast surcoat, armor worn by soldiers loyal to Godric the Grafted. The surcoat depicts the distant Erd Tree and the Beast Regent, an emblem of the golden lineage. Both are symbols of glory now past. So, one thing that I find very fascinating about this idea that Serosh became Godfrey's Beast Regent to suppress Godfrey's ceaseless lust for battle, is that beasts in our world tend to be symbols of ferocity, symbols of unbridled violence and bloodlust. So, in the world of Elden Ring, the notion that a beast would be the thing that tames those impulses is pretty interesting to me, and seems kind of opposite to our association of beasts as feral. And of course, throughout history, certain beasts have had, symbolism around them as being noble, or calm, or intelligent, or what have you, but in general, animals are, wild animals. But in Elden Ring, beasts have a little bit of a different place, so let's read some items related to beasts, and maybe we can get some clarity here. Bestial Sling, incantation taught by Gerank, the beast clergyman. Swiftly flings a number of sharp rock shards. This incantation can be cast without delay after performing another action. It is said that in the time before the Erd Tree, stones were the first weapons of the beasts who had gained intelligence. Now we can read the Chinkadea. Short sword, given to high-ranking clergymen of Farum Azula, raises potency of bestial incantations. The design celebrates a beast's 5 fingers, symbolic of the intelligence once granted upon their kind. So, I'll read the next one and then we'll talk a little bit more. Bestial Vitality, incantation taught by Gerank, the beast clergyman. Fills the body with bestial vigor, restoring HP over a period of time. Having gained intelligence, the beasts must have felt how their wildness slipped away as civilization took hold. Beast Cleaver, curved greatsword of colossal size, forged of dull iron, and wielded by the beastmen of Farum Azula. The blade is incredibly heavy, but well balanced, comparatively easy to wield for the damage it delivers. possess knowledge beyond human ken. And finally, Beast Crest Heater Shield, a medium-sized metal shield, easier to handle than a kite shield. Features a beast as its crest, serving to remind warriors not to succumb to the arousal of battle. Fight with passion, but not become its prisoner. So, we get a lot of interesting lore about beasts in Elden Ring here. That they were once presumably feral, kind of wild animals, and then intelligence was bestowed upon them. And then their 5 fingers became symbolic of that intelligence. So, I think, and I haven't done a comprehensive, examination of this, but I would guess that in Elden Ring, if you look at, a lot of the wild animals that are just wandering the world, those are, low intelligence beasts. Those are just regular animals. But then stuff like the Beastmen and Serosh and Malakath, those probably all have 5 fingers. I imagine there's a trend where all the intelligent ones have 5 fingers because it's symbolic of their intelligence. Let's see. Yeah, having gained intelligence, the beasts must have felt how their wildness slipped away. So, the beasts were at one point ferocious, feral animals, and somehow they were given intelligence. That's pretty interesting. I don't know how that happened. But this is not a video primarily about the beasts. But yeah, so kind of in summary, it seems that beasts in Elden Ring have a certain intelligence, and perhaps even intelligence beyond what humans have. The Beast Cleaver says that directly. It says, "It's clear the Beastmen possess knowledge beyond human ken." And there's this obligation to not fall to bloodlust, to not fall to the passionate emotions of wildness, right? The Beast Crest Shield, Heater Shield, talks about fighting with passion, but not becoming its prisoner. So, intelligent beasts in Elden Ring seem to represent self-discipline. Thus, when Godfrey took Serosh as his regent, Serosh's self-discipline and intelligence were the motivating factor. They served to stem Godfrey's lust for battle. But why did Serosh join Godfrey? Well, we can look at the armor of Recusant Bernal, the beast champion armor. And we read, "Silver armor engraved with tiny beasts, worn by Bernal the Recusant. Beasts are drawn to champions and to lords, and this armor befits a champion worthy of becoming a lord, and that is what Bernal was, until his maiden threw herself into the fire." So we're going to ignore that very juicy, intriguing line about Bernal and his maiden, and we're just going to focus on that first bit. Beasts are drawn to champions and to lords. So, if that is the case, then, we know that there's no greater champion or lord in the history of the Lands Between than Godfrey. And if Serosh was the Lord of Beasts, then it seems fitting that the greatest champion in the land deserves not just any common beast as his regent, but the Lord of Beasts himself. So, think that about explains why, kind of the deal with Serosh, why he's clinging to his back. Of course, when you see Godfrey in the game, he's got Serosh clinging to his back. Yeah, something's clicking in my mind right now, but I'll talk about that a little bit later, because it's not really relevant at the moment. What else about Godfrey? At some point, we know that Godfrey became the leader of the Crucible Knights. We can read it in the armor set for the Crucible Knights. The Crucible Axe Helm, for instance, reads, Helm of the Crucible Knights who served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. The axe ornamentation is the Knight Ordovis's mark, displayed also by his men. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erd Tree. Strengthens aspects of the Crucible incantations. So, I don't know quite what to say about Godfrey and his relationship with the Crucible Knights. I can't really think of any other connections that ties Godfrey to the Crucible, or at least, direct connections. I know there's a lot of theorizing about everything, but in terms of direct lore, this is kind of the only connection I know of. And I mean, Godfrey, he doesn't have any Crucible markings. He doesn't seem to venerate the Crucible at all. He's not wearing, the red gold armor. He doesn't use Crucible incantations. He doesn't have any of the Crucible flesh growths on him, the misbegotten growths where the Crucible causes feathers and scales and stuff to grow on people. So he seems kind of unrelated to the Crucible as far as I can tell. But then he also happens to lead the Crucible Knights, which is kind of interesting. I don't really know how to explain that. Besides the fact that, he was just the Lord, and so naturally they would be under his command. But yeah, Godfrey was such a powerful warrior that he drew the Lord of Beasts himself to him as his beast regent. And eventually this strength of Godfrey's caught the eye of Queen Marika the Eternal, and she saw a use for him. And so their union made Godfrey the first Elden Lord. We can read the description of Godfrey's weapon to gain a little more insight into this transition from a humble warrior to a lord. The Axe of Godfrey. A weapon of Godfrey, Elden Lord. It was broken in a battle fought as leader of the Tarnished during the Long March. This weapon is symbolic of Godfrey's vow to conduct himself as a lord, later becoming an emblem of the golden lineage. In the days of the past, a crown was warranted with strength. So, this description suggests to us that Godfrey's strength warranted him his place at Marika's side, warranted him his crown. And there's also this implication that Godfrey set aside his previous ways, his barbarian ways, and conducted himself in a manner befitting a noble lord rather than a common warrior of the Badlands. Perhaps, Queen Marika insisted that her consort could not act as a common barbarian, driven only by lust for war and blood. But regardless, Marika did choose Godfrey as her consort, and he became first Elden Lord. The Talisman of Lord's Bestowal talisman references Godfrey as Elden Lord, it says, a talisman depicting Godfrey, first Elden Lord, receiving the precious sap. Increases poise after using a flask of tears. The Lord accepted the sap stoically, without any sign of wavering. No wonder Lord of the Erd Tree casts a long shadow over the lands. And this idea of him accepting the sap, this is the sap of the Erd Tree. We can read the Blessed Dew Talisman to learn about that. Talisman depicting a drop of the Erd Tree's sap. A blessed boon. Gradually restores HP. It was once thought that the blessed sap of the Erd Tree would drip from its boughs forever. But that age of plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erd Tree became more an object of faith. So, Marika and Godfrey, of course, they shacked up together, and one thing led to another, and they had some kids. They had 3 children together. The magnificent Godwyn, Marika's golden child, and the twins, Moog and Morgott, both of whom were afflicted with the curse of the omen. I have to ask, can Serosh ever get off Godfrey? Is he just, stuck to him? Because if Godfrey and Marika are, getting jiggy with it in the sheets, having to pop out some kids, Serosh being there would be kind of, a little awkward. Anyway, maybe we shouldn't think about such things. So, Marika was not just using Godfrey as breeding stock. She was using him as her conquering arm, her sword, her warrior lord that would go out and subdue her enemies. And so, you have red-haired Radigan, who's going out and trying to conquer the Carrion Royals. And he has to resort to seduction and marriage to come out on top in that engagement. And meanwhile, our Jimbro Godfrey was unstoppable. No enemy stopped him. He conquered, the entirety of the lands between, pretty much. And we learn a lot about his various victories. So, for instance, outside Castle Morn, on the Weeping Peninsula, there's a sword monument that reads, "The siege of Castle Morn. A lone hero fights for his vengeance, only to fall at the hand of Lord Godfrey." So, this lone hero seems pretty likely to be the champion that's referenced in the crafted blade greatsword, the description of that weapon, which says, "The storied sword of Castle Morn, a revenger's weapon. It is burdened with oceans of anger and regret, one of the legendary armaments. A lone surviving champion from a country now vanished was so determined to continue fighting that he claimed the swords of an entire clan of warriors. Skill, oath of vengeance. Swear an oath upon the great sword to avenge the clan, temporarily raising all attributes for a certain duration. While the oath's effects are active, poise will also be increased." So, little is known about Castle Morn's history beyond these couple bits of lore. Of course, in the modern times, we know that the misbegotten servants there revolted against the nobles who lived there. But yeah, in its distant past, I suspect that the vanished country referenced in the the grafted blade greatsword was probably an early conquest of Godfrey's at the direction of Queen Marika. It may have even been a country of, like, misbegotten, which would be kind of, in line with Elden Ring's themes around, like, conquering and what happens to the conquered. If they conquered the Weeping Peninsula, and it was full of misbegotten, and then they turned those misbegotten into slaves, basically, in Castle Morn. But of course, that's all speculation. And on the topic of the grafted blade greatsword, it's pretty interesting to note that the hilt of the sword bears a crest of a roaring lion, which is the symbol of Godfrey and the golden lineage, representing Serosh, of course. So maybe this means that, like, the conquered country initially bore some reverence for Serosh and Godfrey and the golden lineage or something like that. And so they, had this on the sword originally, but I think this probably is I imagine this crest is a later addition to the sword, sort of a victory, a symbolic act of victory over the defeated country, where they take the final weapon, wielded by the last hero of the country, and, bastardize it by adding the symbol of the golden lineage. Kind of symbolize the Golden Order's total domination over the conquered people. And also, I think this is likely because the lion part of the sword, the crest there at the hilt, seems to be a later addition. I can't say for sure, but it looks less, corroded and rusty and whatnot than the rest of the sword. And it's also very clearly made of a different material. So, my guess is they conquered this country, and then when they took this sword that kind of represented the resistance of the country, they hammered a lion into it, just as a symbol of, how the Golden Order had come out on top. Godfrey, of course, had more successes in battle. He faced down the Storm Lord, the first ruler of Stormvale. Once upon a time, that storm-shrouded hill that you see when you first start playing Elden Ring was commanded by a hawk monarch called the Storm Lord, or the Stormhawk King. We can find his ashes, which read, "The Stormhawk King, ashes of a hawk revered by all others as sovereign, back in the days when Stormvale's winds still raged like no other. This ancient monarch is proud, however, refusing to answer anyone's summons." We can also read about some of the Stormlord's followers, such as in the Ashes of Stormhawk Dean, which read, "Ashen remains, in which spirits yet dwell, used to summon the spirit of Dean, the Stormhawk, spirit of a fierce hawk that faithfully rendered lifelong service to the old King of Stormvale, long ago, when the true storm raged. Its cries embolden its fellows in battle, and the tempestuous winds that encircle it shred through foes." And we can also read about another hawk, a very sad description about a hawk that had been pressed into service for Godric. And the description of the Warhawk ashes reads, "Ashen remains in which spirits yet dwell, used to summon the spirit of a warhawk, spirit of a Stormvale warhawk, the talons of which have been sliced off so that razor-fine swords could be grafted in their place. With its lord vanquished and its wings wounded, the hawk perished as it solemnly gazed at its former home. The storm is a warhawk's cradle. And I think I forgot to read this, but we know that Godfrey was the one that led the conquering of Stormvale, because in the Elden Lord description it says, Godfrey faced the Storm Lord alone. The Elden Lord armor says that. And we'll return to that armor set a little later. But yeah, he crushed the storm of Stormvale and made the hawks who lived there subservient to the Golden Order. And then in time, somebody, presumably Godric, used grafting arts to slice the talons off of the hawks and replace them with swords, which is just a really cruel, evil thing to do. Just another cruelty of the Golden Order, I suppose. Finally, the last conquest of Godfrey's that we know about in the lore is his conquest of the giants. First, we should know that giants are great enemies of the Erd Tree. We can read the Roar Medallion Talisman, which says, a bronze medallion depicting a roaring giant enhances roars and breath attacks. In ancient times, the giants were mortal enemies of the Erd Tree. Their bellowing roars desolated nature, triggered avalanches, and whipped up storms of flame. As enemies of the Erd Tree, Marika, of course, needed the giants to be dealt with. And they were particularly dangerous to her because the fire that they kept in their kiln on the top of the mountain was capable of burning the Erd Tree. And Marika knew that for as long as that weapon was accessible, that her Age of the Erd Tree could never truly be secure. At the first church of Marika, we can hear Melina recount the words that Queen Marika spoke to Godfrey and his soldiers when they breached the mountain of the giants. She says, "Hark, brave warriors, hark, my lord Godfrey, we commend your deeds. Guidance has delivered ye through ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword, and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erd Tree." And of course, Godfrey's war was successful. They slaughtered all of the giants, save for one who was imprisoned atop the mountain to guard his people's fire. And as a fun side note, it seems possible, maybe not likely, there's no other evidence as far as I know, but it seems possible that Mesmer the Impaler joined this fight because all of the dead giants are impaled with these large, kind of Triton-like weapons. And, of course, Mesmer has the name Mesmer the Impaler, so it seems possible that he had something to do with it. Anyway, we don't know, one way or another. But they did defeat the giants. We can find a sword monument on the mountain that reads, "The war against the giants. Champions battle, trolls betray, fire vanquished. The era of the Erd Tree begins." So that line, trolls betray, that refers to the fact that the trolls joined Godfrey in fighting against their own giant kin. You can find trolls throughout the land, still warriors of the Golden Order. One of these trolls was called Theodorix, and he was a great warrior in this battle against the giants. He has a pretty grisly fate, which can be found in the incantation that bears his name. The Theodorix's magma incantation. Superior incantation of Dragon Communion channels the power of the great worm Theodorix, transforms caster into a great worm to spew a large volume of magma breath, allows one follow-up attack. The name of the ancient troll warrior Theodorix lives on as a hero of the war against the giants. But that's neither here nor there. In the end, Godfrey had conquered all the outstanding enemies of the Erdtree. The giants, the Storm Lord, the revenging hero of Castle Morn, and all others, presumably, that he had been pointed at, like a heat-seeking missile by Queen Marika. And, of course, somebody who did such good service would be rewarded, right? Well, let's see what Godfrey's reward was. By reading the smoldering church monument. Lord Godfrey, at last, at the end of his campaign, his golden armies unvanquished and unbowed, yet finds grace lost, tattered, and faded. And now we can return to the Elden Lord armor that I quoted from earlier, and let's read the whole thing. Elden Lord armor, armor of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. The age of the Erdtree began amongst conflict, when Godfrey was lord of the battlefield. He led the war against the giants, faced the Storm Lord alone, and then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. And so, after all that he did for the Golden Order, Godfrey's reward was to have the grace of gold stripped from his eyes, the favor of Queen Marika taken from him, and he became something entirely new. He became the first of the Tarnished, those subjects of Queen Marika, from whom she had taken back the grace that she had given. So Marika's words, as recounted to us by Melina, shed some light on this situation. These are two quotes from the Third Church of Marika and the Church of the Pilgrimage that I put together. My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in the land afar, where ye will live and die. Then, after thy death, I will give back what once I claimed. Return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring. Grow strong in the face of death, warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey. And then the remembrance of Hoarah tells us what happened next. Remembrance of the warrior Hoarah, hewn into the Erdtree. The power of its namesake can be unlocked by the finger reader. Alternatively, it can be used to gain a great bounty of runes. When Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was robbed of his grace, becoming tarnished, he took with him his kinfolk and left the lands between. After the long march of the Tarnished came to an end, Godfrey divested himself of kingship, becoming a simple warrior once more. The Long March is referenced in a couple of other items, and it is the exodus of all the Tarnished, all of those people who were stripped of the grace of gold. They were exiled from the lands between, and they all left. We can read Godfrey's axe again for a little more, now that we have a bit more context about what it's referring to. A weapon of Godfrey, Elden Lord. It was broken in a battle fought as leader of the Tarnished during the Long March. This weapon is symbolic of Godfrey's vow to conduct himself as a lord, later becoming an emblem of the golden lineage. In the days of the past, a crown was warranted with strength. So what's kind of cool about that is when you are fighting through Lane-Dell, trying to get to the Erd Tree, you find a golden shade of Godfrey, and you have to fight him to progress. And he has his full axe. His axe is unbroken, for it fractured during the Long March. And so this shade is from, long before that, when Godfrey was Elden Lord. The thing that clicked in my mind earlier was Serosh is not on Godfrey's back when he is that golden shade. So this isn't, 100% proof necessarily, but that seems to suggest to me that Serosh only became Godfrey's Beast Regent after Godfrey became Elden Lord. But that's not strong evidence. It could very well be that Serosh just isn't part of the shade of Godfrey for whatever reason. On the topic of Godfrey's axe, we can read the axe talisman, which reads, "A talisman depicting an axe and a warrior enhances charge attacks. The lord who led the Long March bore an axe, and his loyal warriors honored him by wielding axes of their own, making them very effective at dealing decisive blows." So, of course, the lord who led the Long March is Godfrey. We can find another reference to this, the Long March, the expulsion of the Tarnished, in the rusted anchor weapon, which reads, "A rusty anchor wielded as a weapon. Each of its 4 flukes is thick and sharp, enabling piercing attacks. When the Tarnished left the lands between with their lord, one boat alone was said to have been left behind." And, small diversion, but just a fun fact, the rusted anchor is kind of my, canonical Elden Ring weapon. In my first playthrough, I played the Wretch, and the first weapon I found was like a little, broken sword, and so I switched to that. And then, in that little, river ravine thing where Patch's Cave is, there's a catacomb at the end of it, and a gladiator boss at the end of that. And that was like the first catacomb that I found. And I beat that boss, and I took his hammer, and I started using that for a while. And then I used that until I found the rusted anchor on the Weeping Peninsula. And I just used that rusted anchor from then until the end of the game. Just a pure strength build. But yeah, I have a lot of fondness for that weapon. So anyway, back to the matter at hand. Godfrey and the Tarnished have been stripped of the grace of gold. and hounded from the lands between. And Queen Marika took on a new husband after that, which we can learn about from Miriel, the Pastor of Vows. And he says, "You wish to know more of Lord Radagon. Lord Radagon was a great champion, possessed of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host when he met Lady Renala in battle. He soon repented his territorial aggressions, though, and became husband to the Carrion Queen. However, when Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Renala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of second Elden Lord. The mystery endures to this day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Renala aside, and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord. But of course, the story of Radagon is a story for another day. So, back to Godfrey. After the long march, he divested himself of his kingship and returned to the lowly warrior that he once was, taking on his old name of Hoarah Loux and becoming a chieftain in the Badlands. He eventually met his death, as Queen Marika intended for all the Tarnished. We can see his corpse in the intro cinematic to the game. In a very striking image, he is speared to a tree alongside his companion Serosh. And so the great Godfrey, first Elden Lord, chieftain Hoarah Loux, met his demise, met his death. And the Badlands are referenced a couple of other times in the game lore. The champion armor set references it, for instance. The champion gaiters say, "Gaiters formed only with leather straps, common wear in the Badlands." And then the champion headband, bracers, and pauldron all say, "Headband reserved for the Badlands bravest, proof that the wearer has slaughtered countless foes." Following the example of their chieftain Hoarah Loux, the brave warriors of the Badlands shun excess adornment. And then we can also read the great axe weapon, which says, "Great axe akin to a huge lump of iron, recognized as the weapon of choice of Badland chieftains. Too heavy to be wielded by those of merely ordinary strength, blows from this axe will flatten enemies, and the force of its charged attack is a sight to behold." And then there's also a food item, a craftable food item, consumable, that references the region, and that is the exalted flesh, a lump of animal flesh pickled in a medicinal solution mixed with fiery spices. Craftable item, temporarily boosts physical attack. Considered a delicacy in the Badlands, this invigorating repast was for the exclusive benefit of those who they deem heroes. And on that note of the word hero, one of the character classes that you can start with in Elden Ring is the hero class. And that class starts with the champion's armor set, the armor set that we just read from the Badlands. And it has this description for the class. It says, "A stalwart hero at home with a battle axe, descended from a Badlands chieftain." So, descended from a Badlands chieftain, it does make you wonder that perhaps if the player Tarnished chooses the hero class, perhaps they are a descendant of Godfrey himself, because Godfrey was a chieftain after all. But yeah, that's about all we know about the Badlands. Like most of the foreign lands in Elden Ring, we know very little about the Badlands. So, Godfrey's gone. He's off dying in the Badlands, but he left a long shadow in the lands between. He was obviously a very significant figure symbolically. We have read a bunch of items about how his axe came to symbolize the Golden Order and the Golden Lineage. General Radahn, who is a child of Radagon and Renala. General Radahn idolized Godfrey, which we see in his armor. Radahn's lion armor. Armor depicting the golden lion worn by General Radahn. The golden lion is said to symbolize Godfrey, the Elden Lord, and his beast regent, Serosh. From his youngest years, Radahn was naturally captivated by the Lord of the battlefield. We also know that Godric is, he's kind of trying to imitate the great strength of his lineage. Godric is of the golden lineage, but he's very weak himself. Kenneth Haight, the nobleman, talks to us about that. He says, "Honestly, Godric's no more than a jumped-up country pumpkin. Lord, don't make me laugh. First, he hid himself amongst the womenfolk to flee the capital. Then hid from Radahn in that castle. Then he insulted Melania, lost to her in battle, only to lick her boots rather than die like a man. Has he no shame, the big girl's blouse? And to think, he's the blood of Godfrey, last of the golden lineage. Though you almost wouldn't know it to look at him. I almost feel sorry for the chap, the more I think of it." And then the axe of Godric says, "Great axe wielded by Godric the Grafted. This golden battle axe is emblazoned with the figure of a beast, representing the strength of Godfrey, first Elden Lord and patriarch of the golden lineage. Quote, I command thee kneel, for I am the Lord of all that is golden." There is also a cut line of dialogue, I think. I think it's if Godric kills you in the fighting or something. He says like, Lord Godfrey, witness my strength, or something like that. It's a cut line, but I remember seeing that in the game files. Okay. What else is there to talk about? What else is there to say? I guess it is interesting to, with that in mind, like how idolized Godfrey was. It's interesting that he was idolized, considering the Tarnished were not. The Tarnished were like these, loathsome, pathetic creatures, nowhere near the nobility of the people blessed with the grace of gold. But Godfrey remained a kind of heroic figure, even though he was the first Tarnished. That's just an interesting thing. But yeah, of course, eventually, Marika kept her promise, and she did resurrect the Tarnished after they all left the Lands Between and died elsewhere. Countless Tarnished returned to the Lands Between to try to become Elden Lord, many eventually losing the guidance of grace. Many wandering from the path set for them, becoming recusants at the Volcano Manor, and going to war against the Archery, or allying with the bloody Mogwin dynasty, or succumbing to any number of, madnesses or despairs or what have you. And as we see in the intro cutscene for the game, where Godfrey's corpse is hanging on the tree, Godfrey is eventually called back as well, because we can see a flicker of grace hovering in front of his body. And after our Tarnished has nearly reached the end of their journey, they encounter Godfrey himself at the Elden throne, Serosh the lion, clinging to his back, still his regent. Serosh's body is kind of faintly translucent, a pale gold color. And Godfrey is cradling his long-lost son, Morgoth, and he speaks his first line of dialogue to his omen-cursed child. And the cutscene says, "It's been a long while, Morgoth. Long and hard didst thou fight, tarnished warrior, spurned by the grace of gold. Be assured, the Elden Ring resteth close at hand. Alas, I am returned to be granted audience once more upon my name as Godfrey, the first Elden Lord." After the cutscene ends, you fight Godfrey. His boss name is Godfrey, first Elden Lord. And once you deal enough damage to him, it's like 60% of his health or something. Second cutscene starts, and Godfrey says, "That will be all. Thou didst me good service, Serosh. I've given thee courtesy enough. Now I fight as Hoarah Loux, warrior." So, this second cutscene is very interesting. It begins with Godfrey stumbling back onto one knee, winded from our attacks. And then Serosh, having been cloaked the whole time in this pale gold, translucent look to him, begins to crawl off Godfrey's back and move towards the player Tarnished. And as he moves, that gold effect over his body fades away, and Serosh begins to materialize into an ordinary, opaque physical form. He is of course, a lion in armor with a circlet on his brow. But as Serosh is doing this, Godfrey grabs a hold of him, one hand holding back his paw and the other one grabbing his lower jaw, and he says that line, "That will be all. Thou didst give me good service, Serosh." And then Godfrey rips Serosh apart, killing him, and introduces himself as Hoarah Loux to fight the Tarnished in Phase 2. And what I find interesting about this moment is, Serosh trying to leave Godfrey's back and then Godfrey killing him. Because when I first played the game, and for a long time, I thought that Serosh was attempting to fight on Godfrey's behalf, that Godfrey had been, was clearly kind of getting beaten up a little bit, and Serosh is like, "Alright, time for me to join the fight." And it was a little confusing that Godfrey would then kill him, but I thought it was just kind of representing that Godfrey was returning to his, barbarian warrior strength that had made him an Elden Lord in the first place. Putting aside, discarding the restraint and self-discipline that the Beast Regent represented. And I thought that for a long time. I didn't really analyze it deeply. That was just kind of my initial assumption. But it always felt kind of weird to me that Godfrey would kill Serosh. But as I was writing, collecting the item descriptions for this video, I was reading the Beast Champion armor, and I'll read it again. It says, Beast Champion armor, silver armor engraved with tiny beasts. Beasts are drawn to champions and to lords, and this armor befits a champion worthy of becoming a lord. And this armor made me kind of reevaluate this moment in the cutscene. So this is totally my, own speculation at this point, but let's kind of go through it, right? I talked before about how this armor description explains to me why Serosh, as the Lord of Beasts, would go join Godfrey and become his regent. Because as a beast, Serosh was drawn to lords. And as the Lord of Beasts, Serosh saw that Godfrey was, the worthiest candidate for Elden Lord, that Godfrey's immense strength befitted a crown. And that made Godfrey a worthy host or something for Serosh. My new theory about this moment is that Serosh sees that the player has beaten Godfrey. And the cutscene begins with Godfrey stumbling back onto one knee. And it could be that Serosh realizes that the player Tarnished is stronger than Godfrey, that the Tarnished is a more worthy lord than Godfrey, that their strength befits a crown more than Godfrey. And so, because beasts are drawn to lords, Serosh decides to abandon Godfrey and join the player as their regent. And then, as Serosh tries to leave, Godfrey kills him, kind of for his betrayal, and in so doing loses the disciplined advisor that made him a lord and reverts to his warrior ways as Hoarah. So that's just the new theory that I had about this moment. It's just kind of fun to think about. I don't know if it's true or not, definitely speculation, but I kind of like that interpretation. But, anyway, that's where the first Elden Lord's story comes to a close. When we defeat Hoarah, he says his dying words, which are, "Brave Tarnished, thy strength befits a crown." And, that's his story. I should add in this video that it seems highly likely that Nepheli Loux, an NPC that you meet in the game, is Godfrey's daughter. They come from the same home, the Badlands, proven by the fact that Nepheli wears the champion armor set, which we talked about before. And of course they share a name, him being Hoarah and her being Nepheli Loux. And she is chosen by Kenneth Haight to be the new ruler of Limgrave in that questline, and given his requirements that the new Lord of Limgrave, after Godric's death, have the proper lineage, a daughter of the first Elden Lord would certainly qualify as a satisfactory candidate for good old Kenneth. And then when you fight Godfrey, if you have made Nepheli the leader or the ruler of Limgrave, you can summon her in battle against Godfrey. And then, and this is such a small thing, right? But even their names match at that point, because when she's summoned in, she's called Nepheli Loux, warrior. And then Godfrey's phase 2 name is Hoarah, warrior. So there's too many things there, right? She's definitely his daughter. Probably a daughter that he had when he moved to the Badlands. Although if she's tarnished, that would, I guess, mean that Nepheli must have been in the lands between at some point. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Godfrey was shacking up with some ladies outside of his marriage with Marika. Who knows? But, yeah, that's about it. I'll drop one last little thing in here. Well, maybe two last little things. I don't know. Okay, I'll drop one more thing, at least. I'll think about it. Godfrey does have some cut dialogue, and I'm always kind of wary of adding cut content into my lore videos because, it's not canon, and it can be kind of dangerous to use it as building ground for theories. But it's still interesting, and I'll leave it up to you how much validity it has. So, Godfrey's cut dialogue. I got this dialogue from a text dump of the game files online, and it is it's located near other pieces of dialogue that appeared in the game's intro cutscene or in trailers. So this Godfrey dialogue would probably have been in one of those places. I first learned about this dialogue from Sekiro Dubby's channel, so I'll link that video in that channel. But here is Godfrey's dialogue. It says, "Elden Ring, O Elden Ring, shaper of life, arbiter of fate, lord of the very stars above, tarnished warrior, spurned by the grace of gold, seek that which hath been lost to thee, across the sea of fog, to the lands between, seek the Elden Ring." And then another section of his dialogue reads, "Brave Tarnished, mighty warriors who fought at my side, await the summons. It will call to thee one day. Heed the fading grace. Listen to the fingers. Gold commandeth the very stars, giving life its fullest brilliance. Elden Ring, O Elden Ring, be ready once it is shattered. Seek the Elden Ring, O Tarnished, across the sea of fog, to the lands between. Become Lord. Enact thy will." So, I'll leave it up to you to interpret that however you like. Alright, I will go on one more tangent, I suppose, here. And this is all kind of impromptu. But now that we've played the DLC, we were introduced to this concept of divine beasts. There are the lion divine beasts and the divine birds. You learn about the divine birds from like the divine bird warrior armor set, and of course the lion divine beasts from like the lion helmet and stuff like that. And we learn from the DLC that there are these divine beasts that are in some way above other beasts. And it does make me wonder if, is Serosh a divine beast? Right? Or at the very least, did the divine beasts, were they the ones that bestowed intelligence on the beastmen, for instance? I don't know. I was thinking about the Storm Lord that Godfrey fought, and I was wondering, is the Storm Lord a divine beast? A divine bird, because we know of the divine birds from the DLC. But the issue there is that, the Storm Lord is obviously associated with storms. And in the DLC, the divine birds are not associated with storms. It is the lion divine beasts that are associated with storms. In which case, Serosh is a lion, so he would theoretically be associated with storms if he were a divine beast, but he isn't. We don't see. Godfrey doesn't use, like, storm powers or whatever. So, I don't know. Yeah, I was hesitant to bring this up because I didn't really have any conclusions or interesting, paths to take it on, but I guess I thought I would just bring it up as just something that I've been thinking about as I've been preparing this video, is like the divine beasts from the DLC. Should that information recontextualize anything from the base game? And I don't know. But yeah, I guess that about covers it. Godfrey's obviously a pretty cool character. I like him a lot. And he's one of the characters and one of the topics in Elden Ring that I feel like we mostly have our questions answered for the most part. There's kind of a lot of information about him, and enough information that I feel like we get a sort of beginning, middle, and end to his story. And there are a couple lingering questions, like, what is Godfrey's relationship to the Crucible and the Crucible Knights? But for the most part, in the world of Elden Ring, where there are some lore topics that leave us with so many questions, Godfrey is kind of nice because it feels like we sort of get, we get the full spectrum of what we need to know about him. But yeah, that's about it for Hoarah Loux, Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. So I hope that you enjoyed our little investigation of the Elden Ring lore around Godfrey today. I certainly did. And I hope to see you next time for our next lore discussion of Elden Ring. I was kind of thinking, maybe I shouldn't even say this, because who knows if I'll do it next or not, but I was thinking that the next lore video I want to do is, I want to do like a complete history of jars in Elden Ring, so starting from the Horn's End and covering their cultural practices around jars, and then moving to the Golden Order and how jars and jarring stuff kind of changed, which is funny to me because it's occurring to me that if you don't know the lore of Elden Ring at all, you would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like the cultural history of jars? Like, you're gonna make a video about, the different uses of mason jars over the years. But obviously, if you know Elden Ring lore at all, you know that jars are a little more significant than that. But anyway, we'll see. I might do some other videos first, or who knows. That's all behind the scenes boring stuff. I don't need to talk about that. But whatever the next video is, my friends, until next time, I hope that you are well. I hope that you take care of yourselves. And I wish you the best. Okay. Goodbye, my friends.